Come on in, pull up a chair and take a load off, because today I'll be reviewing and paging through Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Ubersreik Adventures from Cubicle 7 Entertainment. Is this tome filled with a half dozen adventures perfect for your WFRP campaigns? Or should you simply say Nein to purchasing Ubersreik Adventures? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang, and happy holidays. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, I'm going to be reviewing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Ubersreik Adventures in just a moment. But first, I do want to remind you, if you like this video, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, ding that bell, because it will not only let you know when I upload videos such as this, it'll also tell you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube Monday through Thursday nights as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. As I said, we are going to be diving on into Ubersreik Adventures, which is for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay from Cubicle 7 Entertainment. We're taking a peek at the 127-page hardcover, which is available in the UK and in Europe. It is not available right now in the US. It is out of stock, but Cubicle 7 Entertainment has indicated that the hardcover will be back in stock by the end of 2020. Very cool. That's one of the reasons why I've kind of held off on doing my review of this, because why would I do a review if you can't get it? But you can pre-order it for $39.99. It is also available in PDF over at DriveThruRPG. It is a bundle because each of the 6 adventures were made available originally in PDF separately. You can get the bundle for $25.95. Do want to also mention that the Gaming Gang is affiliated with the DriveThruRPG sites. So if you are going to visit, say, DriveThruRPG, by all means, please visit thegaminggang.com, click on one of our banner ads, and that way, if you do make a purchase, I get a little portion of that sale. And all those little portions add up and really do help keep the gaminggang.com around. So let's swing on over to the other camera, because here we've got Ubersreik Adventures. Should mention that the fine folks over at Cubicle 7 Entertainment were kind enough to send me this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else has received any other sort of compensation for me to share my thoughts about this book. It's important for you to understand that. Also, I am going to provide kind of a summary of what's going on in the adventures. I am going to try to stay as spoiler-free as I possibly can as I try to get this centered up for you all. Whoops. But as I page through, there are going to be some spoilers here. So if you are a player and you're hoping that your game master is going to run any of these Ubersreik Adventures, I would probably not recommend watching any more of this video. All right, so now that it's just the game masters and myself, let's jump on in here. We get a bit of an introduction. We got our first adventure, If Looks Could Kill. One aspect of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Adventures that I have found is that a lot of these adventures aren't exactly what meets the eye. What is first apparent to the player characters and the players isn't necessarily going to be what happens in the end. I like that about the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Adventures. Something that I do know some players and game masters have commented about is sometimes some of the adventures for WFRP don't have a lot of monsters in them. this is a monster adventure, so that will take care of that. In fact, the player characters are effectively hired on as escorts for a caravan, and turns out that there is a monster that is kind of haunting the mining location that they're heading to. But like I said, not everything is what meets the eye, so pretty interesting. So it's a pretty good adventure. Has a lot of NPCs in it, not as many as some WFRP adventures do, but there are some PCs that you have to kind of keep track of and keep track of their motivations, what's going on. One aspect that I do like too for each of these adventures is shaking things up, and it's just some added options. If you want to take these adventures and kind of string them all together into kind of a campaign, you can do that. And I dig how we get that little portion at the end of each of the adventures. Then we've got the Madmen of Gathaim, which is another monster adventure. So the player characters find themselves in a town that seems like everybody is losing their minds. They are all terrorized to various different degrees, and it's because of a monster that they have encountered in the town. And the player characters don't necessarily know exactly what this monster is because they're getting a lot of conflicting information. One of the cool aspects of this adventure is that the player characters are going to have to kind of piece together different aspects of what they might be dealing with from various witnesses. And a lot of the insight that they'll receive is going to help them defeat the creature that has terrorized this town. I like this adventure as well. Once again, we get a little shaking things up section. Then we get Heart of Glass, where the player characters are approached and hired to investigate a murder. And one aspect of a lot of these adventures that are in Ubersreik Adventures is there's kind of a little bit of a focus on witch hunters throughout that I thought was kind of interesting. Not every adventure, but there are like 3 or 4 of them off the top of my head have some kind of bit of an aspect with witch hunters in it as well. This is actually a relatively long adventure. You will see a bit more magic than you're probably used to in most Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay adventures as well. So in fact, there's even right here, Thoughts on High Magic. It's one of the handouts that the player characters will receive. I have to say, out of all the adventures, I like the line art from this adventure the most. I think it's really, really nicely done. I know I have commented in the past that I would prefer more of the artwork to be in color. Some people have said, hey, you know what? They like the black and white because it really is a throwback to first edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I get that. I completely understand that. I just like to see color artwork. It's just me. I don't knock any of these adventures because we don't have all color artwork, though. Next, we get Slaughter in Spitalfield, where the player characters find themselves effectively quarantined in this slum tenement where this mysterious disease is overtaking people. So everybody has been quarantined, which strangely enough is kind of fitting right now with COVID-19. I don't know, maybe this adventure might hit a little too close to home for some out there. Don't want to trigger anybody. But there's no getting around it because you just saw it right here. The source is a vampire, actually. Pretty cool adventure like that as well. We've got Bait and Witch. This is another one of the adventures that has a focus on witch hunters a bit. So this is another one of those adventures where not everything is as it seems. So the players find themselves helping someone out by kind of trying to create a diversion for them, and they find themselves actually being sucked in to the adventure at hand. So we get our shaking things up. Then we've got the Guilty Party, which out of the 6 adventures, this is the one that you might find, I guess I would say, the least usable if you're already running Enemy in Shadows, or if you have no plans to run Enemy in Shadows. It's not a bad adventure as a standalone. It's rather long. It's extremely railroaded, which is an aspect of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Adventures. To be very honest, the adventures tend to be less sandboxy, more railroadish. But all in all, the adventures are usually pretty good, even though they are a bit of a railroad, or in this case, a complete railroad. Sometimes the trips on the railroad can be fun. But as I mentioned, if you're not running Enemy in Shadows, you might not necessarily see the benefits of this adventure. For one, the player characters kind of end up in a tight spot at the end, kind of screwed over, to be honest with you, which actually leads into Enemy in Shadows. So I get that. It kind of gives them some impetus to start that campaign. Then again, like I said, if you're not running it, I don't know how useful this adventure is going to be. So we get a little NPC index, and that is what we find when we take a look at Ubersreik Adventures for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay from Cubicle 7 Entertainment. Let's swing on over to the other camera, because I will wrap things up, provide some final thoughts, and give this a review score. I like Ubersreik Adventures. I really do. I think, for the most part, the adventures are all different enough. They don't all have the same flavor to them as sometimes we see with interconnected adventures. Does sometimes happen. Like I said, you can utilize these adventures as standalone. You can pop them in the midst of a current Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay campaign that you've got. Even if you're running Enemy in Shadows, you can easily pop some of these adventures in just as kind of a change of pace. So I do like that. A couple of things about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Adventures that people might not be aware of. They don't tend to be very combat heavy, simply because combat in WFRP is very deadly. It's very easy for player characters to get killed. Not necessarily just killed, but maimed really badly to the point where player characters are probably, or the players, I should say, are like, I guess I should be rolling up a new character now. So you don't have that emphasis on combat that you would see in, say, like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. You tend to have a lot of combat. In Pathfinder adventures. Not so much with the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay adventures. So got to keep in mind, the whole system itself, including these adventures, is designed for a bit of a different mindset for those of you out there enjoying your fantasy role-playing games. Also, do want to point out that for the Game Master, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Adventures, including these, tend to have a lot of NPCs that you need to keep track of, as well as not only the NPCs themselves, but their agendas, their schedules sometimes, as far as what's going on when. So it's very important that you keep that in mind. Also, as I mentioned, many of the WFRP adventures tend to be kind of railroady. They're not terrible. It's not like hand-waving everything. It's like, well, no, you're going to do this now. It's not like the Game Master is basically just running the adventure for them and the player characters are just along for the ride. It's not to that extent, but they do tend to be a bit railroady compared to other sandbox type of adventures. That said, I definitely do like Ubersreik Adventures, even though the last adventure, if you're not running Enemy in Shadows or not about to run Enemy in Shadows, you might not have a lot of use for it. Doesn't stand on its own all that well, especially the end, because the end is a downer. It really is a downer. But that said, as a whole, I definitely recommend Ubersreik Adventures. I give this an 8.5 out of 10. I just ding it a little bit because of that last adventure. You know, your mileage is going to vary on that, as well as the adventure's a little bit of a railroad too. But I really do like the system. I like the adventures, so I'm always pleased to see new WFRP releases head my way. All right, once again, as I mentioned, this is not in stock in North America at the moment, at least as of this recording, but the hardcover will be back in stock supposedly by the end of 2020, and you can pre-order from Cubicle 7's website. And of course, it is still available as a bundle in PDF over at DriveThruRPG. All right, that is it for this time out. Once again, if you like this video, give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you subscribe, ding that bell, because not only will it let you know when I upload videos such as this, it'll also inform you when my live stream, The Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday through Thursday nights right here on YouTube as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news. And of course, as I wrap up all my videos during this never-ending pandemic, let me hope that all of you out there are being smart and staying safe. I'll see you next time. Oh, you're still here. Well, if that's the case, if you'd like to subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel, by all means, click right here. And if you'd like to check out one of our recent live streams, click right up top. And if you want to roll the dice and see what the algorithm for YouTube recommends, click right here. And of course, thank you once again for watching. And gang, please stay safe and wear a mask.